Hello, my name is Emma, and today I want to share my story with you. A story of how I learned to speak English fluently and confidently, and how it transformed my life. When I was a child, the sound of English was always around me. It was on television, in books, and I heard it in the streets. I would listen to the characters on TV and dream of speaking like them, with that ease, that fluency. But whenever I tried, it felt like the words were locked inside me, and I couldn't find the key to let them out. I remember the first time I tried speaking English outside of my school. My voice trembled, and I struggled to find the right words. The person I spoke to smiled politely, but I could see the confusion on their face. It hurt. I felt so small, like my words were too weak to carry my thoughts. People would sometimes laugh, and I started to believe that maybe English was something I would never fully understand. I would sit in my room, surrounded by books, practicing words over and over again. I would read sentences aloud, trying to perfect every sound. But no matter how hard I tried, I felt like I was never good enough. My throat would tighten with frustration, and tears would sting my eyes. I would think, why can't I be like them? Why can't I speak as easily as they do? It felt like a mountain I could never climb, and I wondered if I would ever be able to speak confidently. Then one day, everything changed. I met someone who would change the way I saw myself and the way I approached learning English. Her name was Mrs. Carter, and she was my English teacher. She had a warm, kind smile, and she always seemed to understand the struggles of her students. She saw how much I was struggling, and one day after class, she asked me to stay behind. We sat down, and she made me a cup of tea. There was something calming about being in her presence. She looked at me and said, "Emma, you are too hard on yourself. English is not about being perfect. It's about being brave enough to try." Her words stuck with me. She told me something that would change my approach forever. Mistakes are not your enemies. They are your teachers. From that day on, I started to look at English differently. Instead of seeing my mistakes as failures, I began to see them as opportunities to grow. I realized that each mistake I made was a step toward improvement. I stopped being afraid of sounding awkward, and I stopped trying to be perfect. I began to focus on expressing myself, no matter how broken my sentences might be. And slowly, something amazing started to happen. I practiced every single day. I would stand in front of the mirror, speaking to myself in English. I would read books aloud, even if the words felt clumsy on my tongue. I would record my voice and listen to it, cringing at my mistakes but knowing that each time I tried, I was getting better. I started to write in a journal, forcing myself to think and express my thoughts in English. It was hard at first, but as the days passed, It started to feel a little more natural. One of the most important things I did was surround myself with English. I watched movies, listened to music, and read books in English. At first, I struggled to keep up. There were so many words I didn't understand, but I didn't let that stop me. I started keeping a notebook where I would write down new words and phrases. I would practice them until they became part of my vocabulary. Every new word I learned felt like a small victory. There were days, of course, when it felt impossible. Days when I wanted to give up. I would try to have conversations, but the words wouldn't come, and I would feel like I was failing. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered what Mrs. Carter had told me. I reminded myself that fluency wasn't a destination I had to reach in a hurry. It was a journey, and every step I took, no matter how small, was progress. One of the most memorable moments of my journey happened in a small coffee shop. I was sitting there, enjoying a quiet afternoon, when a tourist approached me. She asked for directions in English, and for the first time in my life, I didn't panic. My heart raced, but I took a deep breath and smiled. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. I spoke slowly, choosing my words carefully. And to my surprise, she understood me perfectly. When she thanked me and walked away, I felt a sense of pride that I had never felt before. I had done it. I had communicated in English, fluently and confidently. That moment felt like a turning point. It wasn't about speaking perfectly. It was about the fact that I had tried and I had succeeded. I realized then that confidence doesn't come from never making mistakes. Confidence comes from trying, from speaking even when you're scared, from pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. I often think back to the girl I used to be, the girl who was too afraid to speak. I wish I could go back in time and tell her that everything would be okay, that it's okay to stumble, that it's okay to make mistakes, because every mistake is a lesson. Every stumble is a step forward, and one day she would be standing here, speaking fluently and confidently, sharing her story with the world. My journey with English has been long, and it hasn't always been easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I thought I would never be good enough, but those moments made me stronger. They taught me perseverance, and they taught me that the only way to truly fail is to stop trying. I kept going, even when it was hard, and that made all the difference. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this: you are capable of so much more than you think. Fluency in English isn't some impossible dream. It's something that is within your reach if you keep pushing forward, if you keep practicing, if you believe in yourself. There will be moments when it feels too hard, when you want to give up. But I promise you, every small step you take brings you closer to your goal. One of the things that helped me the most was surrounding myself with people who spoke English. I joined conversation groups where I could practice speaking without fear of judgment. At first, I felt awkward and shy, but over time I began to feel more comfortable. The more I spoke, the more natural it became. I realized that the only way to improve was to keep speaking, even if I made mistakes. I also started to set small goals for myself. I would pick one new word every day and try to use it in a sentence. I would practice speaking in front of the mirror for 5 minutes each morning. These small goals kept me motivated, and they reminded me that progress is made one step at a time. I didn't have to be perfect overnight. I just had to keep moving forward. And little by little, I did. My vocabulary grew, my sentences became clearer, and my confidence soared. I began to enjoy speaking English, and I no longer feared making mistakes. I had conversations with strangers. I read books in English without feeling overwhelmed, and I even started thinking in English. It became a part of me, something that no longer felt foreign, but familiar. I remember one day, I was sitting with my grandmother. She had always spoken to me in English, and I would respond in our native language because I was too afraid to speak English with her. But that day, something changed. I looked at her and spoke to her in English. For the first time, we had a real conversation without needing to switch between languages. It was a simple conversation, but to me, it was monumental. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized that the language barrier between us had finally disappeared. It wasn't just about speaking English anymore, it was about being able to connect with the people I loved in a way I had never been able to before. That's what language is. It's not just words and grammar. It's a bridge. It's a way to connect with people, to share your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences. It's a way to open doors to new opportunities, new friendships, and new possibilities. And the more you practice, the more confident you become, the wider those doors will open for you. There were still days when I struggled. Days when I would listen to native speakers and feel like I would never reach their level. But I reminded myself that fluency is not about being perfect. It's about being able to communicate. It's about being able to express yourself, to share your ideas, and to connect with others. And that's something you can do, even if your words aren't perfect. So, if you're feeling frustrated, if you're feeling like you'll never be able to speak fluently, I want you to remember this. You are on a journey. Every time you speak, every time you practice, you are moving forward. You may not see the progress today, but one day you will look back and realize just how far you've come. Fluency is not a destination. It's a process, and it's a process that requires patience, perseverance, and a lot of practice. But I promise you, it's worth it. because one day you will find yourself speaking without hesitation, without fear, and you will feel a sense of pride that you never imagined possible. If I could give you one piece of advice, it would be this: be kind to yourself. Don't expect perfection. Embrace your mistakes because they are helping you learn. Surround yourself with English and immerse yourself in the language as much as you can. And most importantly, never give up. Keep going. Keep practicing. Keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Because fluency is within your reach, and one day you will get there. And when you do, you'll realize that all the struggles, all the frustration, all the hard work was worth it. Because you'll be able to stand tall, speak confidently, and share your story with the world. Just like I'm doing today.